Let's look at neural architecture in mollusks. So here I like this one. This is actually comparing 5 different monoplacophorans, but we think monoplacophorans are actually pretty simple. Pardon me. Compared to the other mollusks, we think they're probably somewhere down near the bottom of the tree if we're making really good trees with lots of genes. Even those things on the first slide that I showed you in the first presentation are actually trees that are only made with a couple of genes, and so we can definitely do better. So let's look at the different parts. So remember on an earthworm how the brain looked kind of like a bunny rabbit. It had these 2 little ganglia that set up on top, which were the cerebral ganglia. Well, here we have 2 bulges, and the bulges are on either side of a ring. So the overall structure of the brain is sort of ring-shaped, but we really just have, it's really just one of these sort of twofold symmetric brains. Kind of similar to what we would have seen in platyhelminthes, for example, or in the rotifers, somewhat similar. They're going to have a couple extra little features, so they will have buccal ganglia. So these are a ball of nerve cells, and you'd normally have a ball of nerve cells dedicated to controlling very important parts of the body. And so the buccal ganglia will control swallowing, or if it's a rotifer, it'll control those trophi coming together and sort of meshing like that. And so here we have dedicated buccal ganglia. They sometimes point up or around or back, but they're always there. And then in most of these, we will also have subragular nerves. So these are the a set of nerves that sort of complete the ring of the brain, and they're going to be running around the radula. And so this is how it's going to control the tongue. It's got a dedicated section of nerve bodies that are just for driving the tongue. And then also in here, super interesting, look what they have in yellow. They have statoliths. So those are just like we saw in some of those more primitive groups, like the ctenophores, for example. Yeah, mollusks tend to use these too. There are quite a few mollusks that are free swimming. You find these things down in the Arctic. And so they need a statolith to be able to tell which way is up. You know, are they swimming down where there's no food, or up toward where there's food? Yeah, this just helps them out. And so you can see the rest of the body is actually derived, or the nervous system occurs in 2 rings, and there are usually connectors between these 2 rings. They haven't drawn them in all the cases, but the connectors would be there. So it's a pretty complicated circuit. Yeah, you've got the cerebrum running this outer ring, and then passing down through here to run the radula and the inner ring. And you've got those 2 halves of the cerebrum actually running the buccal ganglia as well, sending the impulses there. So that's the way this whole thing is hooked up. And then the statoliths will also be hooked up, and they will feed back through neurons back to the cerebral ganglia. And so that's the structure of the brain. And here, let's go full size. There we go. Okay, and it'll do the subtitles at the bottom. Yes, access the microphone. I've got it. Awesome. Okay. So this is the inside of a polyplacophoran. So this is a chitin. And you can see up at the front, there is that mouth. And inside of there would be the radula. And so running underneath that, you'd have the little radular ganglia. And running in a ring kind of around this, you would have the actual brain with those 2 cerebral ganglia being up here, but more toward the shell side. This is the underside of it. You can see down here at the back, we are going to have the lungs, basically. Lungs and the gonads will be back there. And so let's look at the brain of a polyplacophoran. Now that we've looked at monoplacophorans, we think polyplacophorans are more recent. Monoplacophorans go all the way back in the fossil record. These are some of the earliest mollusks that we are sure are mollusks out there. Polyplacophorans come along later, for sure. And so we think there may be a modification of monoplacophorans. And as you can see here, there are the 2 cerebral ganglia. The buccal ganglia are making a sort of a wishbone shape up here. And in general, it's a very similar structure. So we are It's like a wraparound brain. It's not quite a full ring brain like we will see later in other groups, but it is definitely wrapping around. And here you can see a comparison of some of the neural architecture in some of the other groups. So Caudofoveata and Solenogastries, very similar. You're going to have specific structures which are going to be equivalent to like the buccal ganglia, and these are usually going to be sensory structures up here. They're going to be running, but in all these cases, you're going to have primary ganglia and cerebral ganglia are going to be here in black. They're going to have ganglia that run around under the bottom to complete that ring, and usually they're going to be two little buccal ganglia that'll stand up tall, kind of on their own, kind of like little bunny ears at the top. So pretty similar, and as you can see here, you're either going to have two complete rings that are connected up, or one complete ring and one that's incomplete that doesn't really join up at the bottom, or two that are kind of incomplete down here, or in scaphopods we think they just don't really connect here, although there are little nerves that are going to cross over throughout this area and are not shown here. They're just showing you the major nerves that are on there. But that's the idea, and that's the molluscan neurological patterning. That's just what they look like. So we got two more slides here, and so these are going to show you kind of an idealized version of an original mollusk. So the original mollusk down here and here, we've got the brain. You can see the brain wrapping around. You got your radula coming in here. There are going to be little tentacles at the front. These are what is going to evolve into the tentacles on an octopus. And these are that skirt that's around the radula that's going to help to push some of the food into the mouth if things don't go right in right away. Then up at the back here, you got your digestive glands, and so they're going to be protected under the shell, if there is a shell on the mollusk in question. Gonads running down the sides, digestive tract running through, and the gills are going to be right down there at the back. And here's our other view where we've got a cutaway of this entire thing. So you can see the flow of food and water. And so it's going to come in here, go through the stomach and such, and we're going to dump it out back here. And there are some mollusks that can breathe in water at the front, and they'll run it in a tube all the way to the back. And there are others that will actually pull in water at one side of the back and spit it out at the other side of the back. Either way, they are dumping waste into the water back here, and they are picking up oxygen out of the water in pretty much the same part of their body. Now, hooked up all out here are going to be a variety of muscles. So the entire body of the mollusk is a lot like a tongue in that the mollusk is able to control it and move it in different directions, make different shapes out of it. And here you can see the two rings, the inner ring and the outer ring of nerves right here. And there's a little brain connecting up. And you can see the brain makes a little circle, and the esophagus runs right through that circle. And those little buccal ganglia are going to come right down here, and they are going to run the tentacles in most cases. And your little statocysts are also going to be down here, rather the buccal ganglia, go up toward the front. So there we go. That's the way they're put together.